Welcome into another show episode of the College Football Show with Alec Pecano. Today I will be giving you on this episode, we will be covering my ACC too early predictions for 2024. Again, all the conferences I will do every single conference again in July and August and give you full-on record prediction, every conference championship game, who's going to win every conference, coaches of the year from each conference, and all that. This is way too early. This is way before the season. This is pre-spring games and all. But let's get into it. So first, we are going to start with my standings for the ACC, my way too early standings. So, at number 17, and you can see I have the win total, their projected win totals next to them. So, at last place in the ACC is Stanford. Their win total is set at 3.5. I don't think they're going to get 3 wins. I think they're going to go under 3 wins. And again, y'all can debate me in the comment section and tell me if there's teams you would put higher in my way too early ACC standings, or if you would move teams lower. So, but back to Stanford. This is their first year in the ACC, and I don't think they hit 3 wins. I think they're going to go under 3.5 wins. I think they get 2. But Stanford, you don't really send your kid to Stanford to play football. You send them there for academics, not athletics necessarily. Except for basketball. They're decent in women's basketball. But they're not a very good football school, and they haven't been since David Shaw was the coach. So I like the under win total. Number 16 is Wake Forest. Wake Forest lost a ton in the transfer portal, and their win total is set at over or under 4.5. I'm going to take under 4 wins. I think they get 3. But I could also see a possible avenue, and at the end of the show, you will get every single ACC team's schedule, and I will give you games that they're going to win, games they're going to lose. But back to Wake Forest. I think Wake Forest, like I said, is going to win 3 games. Then again, I could also see them winning more than 4 games. This is before spring, the spring games and spring practice starts. Right now, I have them under 4 wins. Virginia's at 15th. Okay. There's a couple of these where I'm going to say it's a push, which means they could win that amount of games or they could win less. So Virginia's the first one. I say their win total is 4.5. I can see them going. It's a push right now because we don't really know who the quarterback's QB is going to be for Virginia. So I can't really say whether they go over 4 wins or under. I think it's push. I think they might win more than 4 games. I have absolutely zero idea. Pitt is at number 14. And I have them going under 5.5 wins. Again, like I said at the beginning, this is pre-spring games for all these teams in the ACC and every conference. Now, post-spring, I will do a top 25 and review the spring games from every team and give you the new conference standings going into the season. But back to Pitt. I'm just saying under 5 wins. I think they're another team that could win 4 games or less. And I think Nate Yarnell gets benched halfway through the season for transfer QB Eli Holstein. Boston College is at number 13. Their win total is set at 5.5. I think they're going to go over 5 wins in Bill O'Brien's first year. I think they win probably 6 games. And I would have had Boston College higher if Jeff Hafley did not leave and go to the NFL to be the defensive coordinator for the Green Bay Packers. I think 6 wins is good enough for Bill O'Brien, Billy O, in his first year as the head coach in Chestnut Hill at Boston College. Number 12, Duke. Under their win total is set at 6.5. I think they don't hit. I think they go under 6 and they win 5 games in Manny Diaz's first year as the head coach. Under 6 wins. Cal's at number 11. Let me explain why. We've seen Manny Diaz as a head coach before. This isn't his first rodeo as a head coach. He was a head coach for Miami a couple years back. And he only lasted 1.5 years. Now, do I think he lasts longer with Duke? Yes. But I think it's going to take time for Duke to get better. Because they did lose a few guys in the portal. And they lost Mike Elko, who dipped out and went to Texas A&M. So I think Duke's going to win less than 6 games. California is at number 11. Their win total is set at 6.5 wins. 6 wins. I think they're going to win over 6 games. I'm going to guess maybe 7. I like Justin Wilcox. He saved his job last year. The entire season last year, he was on my chopping block for coaches that could get fired. And he's still on there this year. But I feel a lot more comfortable with taking him off now that he's not in the Pac-12 anymore. And he's over in the ACC, which is a lot. I wouldn't say it's sort of an easier conference, but I could see Cal winning more games. Number 10, Syracuse. Their win total is set at 6 wins, 6.5 wins. I think they're going to go over that and win 7 or 8 games. 7 games at the most, maybe 8. I love the hire of Fran Brown. I absolutely like it a lot. I think it might take Syracuse fans, hear me out. It may take 1 or 2 years before y'all are at the top of the ACC again, competing for the ACC championship. But give it time. Be patient. I think y'all win 7 games this year. At number 9, Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech had a really good season last year. I think they improve even more this year. And they win. Their win total is 5.5. I say they're going to win over 5 games, which means they're probably going to win 6. And I can see them making a bowl game. At number 8, North Carolina State. Dave Doran. Watch that name for a big-time head coaching gig if it becomes open. He might dip from North Carolina State, but not this year. I think North Carolina State will win over 8 games. I think they win 9. Virginia Tech is another team that had a really good year last year, and they're at number 7, and their win total set at 7.5. I think they go over 7 wins and win between 8 and 9 games. I really like what Brett Pry has done at Virginia Tech. And I think Virginia Tech is just a sliver away from being a top ACC contender. If they can stay healthy the whole season, going into this year, I think Virginia Tech could be a dark horse to win the ACC. At number 6, North Carolina. Mac Brown, their win total is set at 8.5. 8 wins, basically. I think they're going to go over 8 wins and win 9 games. There's going to be a lot of teams that I think win 9 games. North Carolina did lose their quarterback, Drake May. He's going to the NFL. But I do think North Carolina is still in good shape. I really like what they've done in the portal and with recruiting. At number 5, Louisville. Louisville. Their win total is set at 8 wins. I think they go over that win total of 8, and they win 9 games. Another team winning 9 games. I was wrong on Louisville last year, and Jeff Brom's first year at Louisville. I didn't think Louisville was going to be as good as they were, and when I'm wrong on something, I admit it. Just like this year, if I'm wrong on something, I will admit when I'm wrong. But I think Louisville is going to win 9 games. Miami, Florida is at number 4. And their win total is set at 9. I think that's a push. They could win more than 9 games. They could win less. It's a make or break year for Mario Cristobal. He did really good in the portal. And he did really good in recruiting. At number 3, Clemson. Their win total is set at 9.5 wins. And I think they go over that and they win 10 games. A down year for Clemson last year was 9-5. And you're going to tell me they can't do better than that this year? I think they can. I think they could go maybe 10-3. At number 2, yes, this is a big surprise to everybody, including me. SMU, their win total is set at 7 wins. I think easily they could go over 7 wins. I think they can win 9, maybe 10, even 10 games. I think they can win that many games in their first year in the ACC. And at number 1, until further notice and proved wrong, I have Florida State. And their win total is at 9.5 at 9 wins. I'm going over 9 wins. I think they could go 11-1 or 12-1 and win the ACC again. This is their revenge tour. They got screwed out of the playoff last year, and I think they're going to be one of the 12 teams in the playoff this year. Teams that will be improved in 2024 in the ACC. Way too early. Number 3, Syracuse. Okay, hear me out. Syracuse had a good year after they got rid of Dino Babers last year. I think they improve a bit more this year and end up with, like I said, over whatever their win total was set at, which was 6.5. I think they go over that by a couple games and improve. Number 2, Georgia Tech. And Georgia Tech's win total, 5.5. They're another team I think that can win more than that. Their projected win total, and that would count as an improvement. And number 1, Virginia Tech. I think they're going to be the most improved team in the ACC this year. And like I said a minute ago, a dark horse to make the ACC title game. Speaking of that, Here's my way too early ACC championship game predictions. At number 3, I have Florida State versus SMU. Now, this would be an intriguing ACC championship game because of the narrative that, oh, this is SMU's first year in an actual conference, and they make the championship game. And then you've got, on the other side, you got Florida State, who is a thoroughbred in the ACC since Mike Norvell's gotten there. And they are the team to beat in the ACC going into 2024. Number 2 ACC championship game, North Carolina, SMU. Again, same thing I said about number 3. Number 2 is North Carolina, SMU. And again, it's the narrative that, oh, this is SMU's first year in the ACC, and you're going to tell me that they can compete and make the ACC title game. To say that's crazy is not an understatement. I think it can actually happen. And number 1, and I've said this twice already, Virginia Tech versus Florida State. You got Virginia Tech, who probably nobody's picking to be in the ACC title game going into this year, even though they were in it till the very end last year, until like the second to last week of the season. And then they got knocked out, eliminated. And then you've got Florida State. And Virginia Tech is my dark horse to make the ACC title game this year. And then you got Florida State, the constant contender for the ACC. And I think all 3 of these matchups would be good matchups for the ACC title game. Now, honorable mention goes to Clemson in Louisville. I did not put that on there, but I think that could also be an ACC title game matchup that people would want to watch. And last but not least for this portion, you've got the coaches, 2 early coaches of the year for the ACC. And that would be number 3, Justin Wilcox, Cal. Justin Wilcox is at number 3. I feel like Cal could be sneakily competitive this year in the ACC. And I feel like Cal could potentially maybe win the ACC. At number 2, Fran Brown. I absolutely love this hire for Syracuse. I love it. It was one of my favorite hires of the offseason, other than Mike Elko going to Texas A&M. I think Fran Brown is going to be a really good head coach for Syracuse. I think, in my opinion, I think he's going to be a better coach than Dino Babers was at Syracuse. And at number 1, Brett Pry, Virginia Tech. Enter Sandman is back at Va Tech, ladies and gentlemen. I think Va Tech is going to be really good this year. And now we're going to do what I said we were going to do a minute ago. So here's Florida State's schedule. And like I said, their win total set at 9.5. Okay, so they start the year at home in Dublin against Georgia Tech. I think that's going to be a win, so they're 1-0. Then they play Boston College. That's also going to be a win. So they're 2-0 going into their first bye week. They come out of that bye week and they play Memphis. I think they're going to beat Memphis, so they're 3-0. They play Cal. Now, can I see an avenue here where Florida State loses to Cal? Yes. Does it happen? No. I think Florida State's going to start the year 4-0. Then they go to SMU. I think they lose to SMU. So they're 4-1. Then they come home and play Clemson at Doak Campbell. Now, if, say Florida State, hypothetically, say Florida State does beat SMU. Florida State's now 5-0 going into that Clemson game. And say Clemson's also undefeated. Game day could be at Clemson, Florida State. Now, the way I'm looking at it is Florida State's coming off a loss to SMU, so they're 4-1. I think they beat Clemson, so they're 5-1. Then they come out of their second bye week, and they play at Duke. I think that's a win, so they're 6-1. They lose to Miami 6-2, lose to North Carolina 6-3, beat Notre Dame 7-3, and then they go into their last bye week. Come out of that, they beat Charleston Southern, and they beat Florida, so they finish 9-3. So Florida State's way too early record prediction is 9-3. Next, we've got SMU. So SMU starts the year at Nevada. I think that's a win. So they're 1-0. They play Houston Christian. I think they win that. So they're 2-0. Then they play BYU. I think they're going to start the year 3-0. Then they come out of their first bye week, and they've got TCU, Florida State, Louisville. I think they're going to go 1-2. They beat TCU, so that makes them 4-0. Then they lose to Florida State, so that makes them 4-2. And then they lose to Louisville, so that makes them So no, they were 4-1 because they lost to Florida. They're 4-2. They lose to Louisville. So then they go into their second bye week, and they come out of that and they play at Stanford. I think that's a win. So 5-2. Duke, they beat 6-2. Beat Pitt 7-2. Beat Boston College 8-2. Beat Virginia 9-2. And lose to Cal 9-3. So they go 9-3, with their losses being to Cal, TCU, and Florida State. Clemson's next. So Clemson starts the year at home against Georgia. Does Clemson beat Georgia? Maybe. I don't think it happens, so they're 0-1. Then they play App State. You need to be really, really careful with Appalachian State. App State has the tendency to beat Power 5 schools, but I don't think they beat Clemson. I think Clemson beats them, so they're 1-1. Then they come out of their first bye week and they play North Carolina State at home. Now, North Carolina State, I think, is going to be good this year, but I think Clemson beats it because it's still early in the season. It's only week 4. So Clemson is now 2-1. Then they get Stanford at home. I think they beat Stanford, so they're 3-1. They're 3-1 going into the Florida State game. I think they beat lose to Florida State, so they're 3-2. They beat Wake Forest 4-2. Beat Virginia 5-2. Come out of their second bye week. They play Louisville at home. I think that's a loss. So they're 5-3. Lose to Virginia Tech 5-4. Beat Pitt 6-4. Beat the Citadel 7-4. And beat South Carolina 8-4. So actually, we're going to redo that. So they start the year at Georgia. That's a loss. They beat Appalachian State. So they're 1-1. Beat North Carolina State 2-1. Beat Stanford 3-1. Lose to Florida State 3-2. Beat Wake Forest 4-2. Beat Virginia 5-2. Lose to Louisville 5-3. Beat Virginia Tech 6-3. Beat Pitt 7-3. Beat the Citadel 8-3. And they beat South Carolina 9-3. So Clemson's way too early win total record is 9-3. So now you got Miami, Florida. The first game of the year for them is at Florida. I think they beat UF, so they're 1-0. They beat Florida A&M 2-0. Beat Ball State 3-0. I think, and you can call me crazy for this, I think they lose to USF, so they're 3-1. Because I think USF is going to be one of the better group of 5 teams this year. So they're 3-1. They play Virginia Tech 3-2. They're going to lose to them. Then they play Cal 4-2. They're going to beat Cal. They lose to Louisville 4-3. Lose to Florida State 4-4. Beat Duke 5-4. Beat Georgia Tech 6-4. Beat Wake Forest 7-4. And beat Syracuse 8-4. So Syracuse, Miami and Florida's win total is 8-4. Way too early win total for Miami and Florida's 8-4. So now you got Louisville at number 5. So they start the year against Austin Peay. That should be an easy win, so they're 1-0. Then they play Jacksonville State. They'll win that 2-0. Then they play Georgia Tech after their first bye week. Look at this gauntlet. They get Georgia Tech, Notre Dame, SMU, Virginia, Miami, Boston College, Clemson. Look at that. Other than maybe Virginia, that's a gauntlet. And Boston College, Clemson, Miami, Notre Dame, and SMU. Those are all good teams. I think they lose to Georgia Tech, so they're 2-1. Beat Notre Dame 3-1. Lose to SMU 3-2. Beat Virginia 4-2. Lose to Miami 4-3. Beat Boston College 5-3. Somehow I think they beat Clemson, so they're 6-3. Then they get Stanford at home 7-3. Lose to Pitt 7-4 and beat Kentucky 8-4. So, actually, no. They go 9-3. Because I think they do beat Pitt. So they're 9-3. They're way too early win total for Louisville is 9-3. North Carolina's next. So North Carolina starts the year at Minnesota. I think they win that, so they're 1-0. They beat Charlotte, so they're going to be 3-0 after they beat Minnesota, Charlotte, and North Carolina Central. Then they play JMU. Will they beat JMU? I think they do. So they're 4-0. They're 4-0 going into the first conference game at Duke. I think they beat Duke. So they're 5-0. 6-0 after they beat Pitt. I think they're going to be 6-1 after they get upset by Georgia Tech. So then they come out of their first bye week and they play Virginia on the road. So they're 6-1 going into that game. They're going to be 7-1 after they beat Virginia. 7-2 after they lose to Florida State. So, and then after their second bye week, they come out, they play Wake Forest. That's a win, so they're 8-2. Then they play Boston College, 9-2. And then they've got the rivalry game with NC State. I think they lose that. So they go 9-3. Way too early record prediction for North Carolina is 8-3. So you have 3 teams. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 teams with 9 wins so far in the ACC. Next is Virginia Tech. So Va-Tech starts the year at home at Vanderbilt. I think they win that. So they're 1-0. And Virginia Tech's win total is 7.5. So take into account that. So they're 1-0 after they beat Virginia. After they beat Vandy. They're 2-0 after they beat Marshall. 3-0 after they beat Old Dominion. 3-1 after they lose to Rutgers. 3-2 after they lose to Miami. 4-2 after they beat Stanford. 5-2 after they beat Boston College. 5-3 after they lose to Georgia Tech. 6-3 after they beat Syracuse. 6-4 after they beat Clemson. After they lose to Clemson. 7-4 after they beat Duke. And 7-5 after they lose to Virginia. So Virginia Tech's way too early record prediction is no. They're going to go 8-4. They're going to beat Virginia. So Va-Tech's way too early win total is 8 wins. I apologize. I was supposed to say 7 through 12. So now you got NC State. NC State starts the year at home against Western Carolina. I think that's a win. Then they get Tennessee and the Duke's Mayo Classic. Unfortunately, they lose to Tennessee, so they're 1-1. They play Louisiana Tech at home the next week. I think they beat Louisiana Tech, so they're 2-1. They're going to be 2-2 after they lose to Clemson. 3-2 after they beat Northern Illinois. 4-2 after they beat Wake Forest. 4-3 after they lose to Syracuse. 5-3 after they beat Cal. 6-3 after they beat Stanford. 7-3 after they beat Duke. 7-4 after they lose to Georgia Tech. And 8-4 after they beat North Carolina. So North Carolina State's way too early win total. What record projection is 8-4. So Georgia Tech is next. The Yellow Jackets. These. So they start the year in Dublin against Florida State. They're going to start out 0-1. They beat Georgia State, so they're 1-1. I think they lose to Syracuse, so they're 1-2. Then they play VMI, 2-2. They beat VMI easily. Then they play at Louisville. Now, one of Louisville's 3 losses is going to be to Georgia Tech. So Georgia Tech wins. They are now 2-3-3 because they lost to Florida State. They lost to Syracuse. No, so they're 3-2. They're 3-2. Yes, 3-2. Then they go into their bye week 3-2. They come out. They get Duke at home. That's a win, so they're 4-2. Lose to North Carolina, 4-3. Lose to Notre Dame, 4-4. Lose to Virginia Tech, 4-5. Lose to Miami, 4-6. Beat North Carolina State, 5-6. And lose to Georgia, 5-7. So Georgia Tech's way too early. Actually, I take that back. They beat Miami and lose to North Carolina State. So that makes them, they were 4-6. That would have made them 5-6. They beat North Carolina State 6-6, 6-5, and they lose to Georgia 6-6. So Georgia Tech's way too early. Record prediction is 6-6. Next, you got Syracuse. And the Cuse, man, they start the year, their win total is set at 6.5. So we got to remember that. So they start the year at home against Ohio. I think that's a win. 1-0. I think they lose to Georgia Tech, so they're 1-1. Then they get Stanford at home. That's a win, 2-1. 3-1 after beating Holy Cross. 4-1 after beating UNLV. 4-2 after losing to North Carolina State. 5-2 after beating Pitt. 5-3 after losing to Virginia Tech. 6-4 after beating Boston College. 6-5 after beating UConn. And 6-6 after losing to Miami. So Syracuse gets right at their win total, so that's a push. So Syracuse goes 6-6 for their way too early record prediction. So California is next. And Cal's win total is at 6. So they start the year against UC Davis at home. I think that's a win. So they're 1-0. Then they play Auburn on the road at Jordan-Hare. Now, this is a cross-country trip for Cal. Do they win this game? I think they do. So they're now 2-0. Then they play San Diego State. I think they win that, so they're 3-0. They lose to Florida State, 3-1. Lose to Miami, 3-2. Miami, Florida. Beat Pitt, 4-2. Lose to North Carolina State, 4-3. Beat Oregon State, 5-3. Beat Wake Forest, 6-3. Lose to Syracuse, 6-4. Beat Stanford, 7-4. And lose to SMU, 7-5. So Cal's way too early record prediction is 7-5. Now we got Duke. And Duke is next. So we've got to get to So Duke starts the year. Oh my gosh. At home against Elon. I think they beat Elon, so they're 1-0. And I have them getting less than 7 wins. Less than 6 wins. So that would mean 5 probably. So they start the year 1-0. I think they beat Northwestern, so they're 2-0. They start the year 3-0 after beating Connecticut and 4-0 after beating Middle Tennessee. Then they get into conference play against North Carolina. That's where they lose their first game. So they're 4-1. They lose to Georgia Tech 4-2. Lose to Florida State 4-3. Lose to SMU 4-4. Lose to Miami 4-5. Lose to North Carolina State 4-6. Lose to Virginia Tech 4-7, and they beat Wake Forest. So they go. Their way too early record prediction is 5-7 for Duke. We're getting close to the end. 40 minutes. So Boston College, they start the year in Tallahassee on September 2nd against Florida State. I think that's a loss, so they're 0-1. Then they come home and play Duquesne. I think they win that. So they're 1-1. They lose to Missouri 1-2. Beat Michigan State 2-2. Beat Western Kentucky 3-2. Beat Virginia 4-2. Boston College win total is, so they're 4-2 going into the Virginia Tech game. I think they lose that. I think they lose. So they're 4-3. I think they lose to Louisville 4-4. Lose to Syracuse 4-5. Lose to SMU 4-6. Lose to North Carolina 4-7, and beat Pitt 5-7. So Boston College is way too early record prediction for me. It's 5-7. So Pitt is next, and they're set at 5 wins. But I think they go under that. So they start the year at home against Kent State. I think they beat Kent State, so they're 1-0. I think they beat Cincinnati 2-0, lose to West Virginia 2-1, beat Youngstown State hopefully 3-1, lose to North Carolina 3-2, beat Cal 4-2. They set at 5 wins. I think they lose to Syracuse 4-3, lose to SMU 4-4. Beat Virginia somehow 5-4. Lose to Clemson 5-6. Lose to Louisville 5-7. And lose to Boston College 5-8. Hold up. So they beat Kent State 1-0. Beat Cincinnati 2-0. Lose to West Virginia 2-1. Beat Youngstown State 3-1. Lose to North Carolina 3-2. Beat Cal 4-2. Lose to Syracuse 4-3. Lose to SMU 4-4. Lose to Virginia 4-5. Lose to Clemson 4-6. Lose to Louisville 4-7. And lose to Boston College 4-8. So Pitt goes 4-8 for their way too early record prediction. We get 3 more teams left. We've got Virginia, Wake Forest, Stanford. We got 3 teams left. So UVA is next. They start the year at home against Richmond, and I have them winning exactly 4 games. So Richmond's a win, so that's 1-0. They lose to Wake Forest 1-1, beat Maryland 2-1, beat Coastal Carolina 3-1, beat Boston College 4-1, and then they lose to Clemson 4-2, lose to that's Louisville, so they lose to Louisville 4-2, lose to Clemson 4-3. Lose to North Carolina 4-4. Lose to Pitt 4-5. Lose to Notre Dame 4-6. Lose to against SMU 4-7. And lose against Virginia Tech 4-8. So way too early record prediction for UVA, University of Virginia 4-8. Wake Forest starts the year, and Wake Forest under 4 wins. So that means they're going to probably get 3. Start the year at home against North Carolina A&T. I think that's a win. They lose to Virginia, so that's 1-1. They lose to Ole Miss 1-2. Beat Louisiana 2-2. Lose to North Carolina State 2-3. Lose to Clemson 2-4. Beat UConn 3-4. Beat Stanford 4-4. Lose to Cal 4-5. Lose to North Carolina 4-6. Lose to Miami 4-7, and lose to Duke 4-8. So no, they're gonna lose to they're gonna lose at North Carolina, so that makes them okay. We're gonna re-go over their schedule. So North Carolina A&T, that's gonna be a win, so they're 1-0. Lose to Virginia 1-1. Lose to Ole Miss 1-2. Beat Louisiana 2-2. Lose to North Carolina State 2-3. Lose to Clemson 2-4. Beat UConn 3-4. Lose to Stanford 3-5. Lose to Cal 3-6. Lose to North Carolina 3-7. Lose to Miami 3-8, and lose to Duke 3-9. So Wake Forest, way too early record prediction for me is 3-9. And last but certainly not least, Stanford. And Stanford is set at 3 wins, and I have them hitting the under. So we're going to see who they start with. So they start with TCU. I think they beat TCU, so they're 1-0. They beat Cal Poly 2-0. Then they come out of their first bye week, and they play at Syracuse. That's a loss. So they're 2-1. At Clemson, that's a loss, 2-2. At Virginia Tech, that's a loss, 2-3. At Notre Dame, lost 2-4. At Omega SMU, lost 2-4. 2-5. Beat Wake Forest 3-5. Lose to NC State 3-6. Lose to Louisville 3-7. Lose to Cal 3-8, and lose to San Jose State 3-9. So Stanford's way too early record prediction is 3-9, which means they pushed. I originally said under. I think Stanford can win 3 games. I think. And now the last thing I'm going to show you guys is how you get a membership to the channel. So you go here, you click on this, and this tells you so here's the price points for my channel, for my memberships. So you get the Alex Minions, which is the starter level, which is 99 cents a month, is 99 cents a month. And then you get the Alex Rough Riders, $4.99 a month. And the Alec Knows MVP Alec Knows MVP package, which is $14.99 a month. And you get all of my every single first dibs on college football upset picks every week, members only live streams, and much more. And then the other thing I'm going to show you is my merch store. Here's the merch store. Right here. This is the merch store, ladies and gentlemen. With all my merch. All the merch you want is on this store. But, ladies and gentlemen, that'll do it for today's show. I will see you back here on Friday. We may have a little change And Friday, programming note, Friday's show will not be at noon. It'll probably be around 1 o'clock. But it may be an hour or 2 hour long show with mock draft, way too early college football predictions, and much more. I do have a poll up on YouTube. You can choose what you want to see Friday. Because remember, Thursday, there is no show at all. Maybe a little snippet, maybe a little YouTube shorts on my upset picks for college basketball on Thursday, but no actual show. But if you enjoyed this video, please leave a thumbs up and comment down below. Other than that, have a wonderful rest of your day. I will see you back here on Friday.